So in this segment, we're going to be discussing journalists kind of fear-mongering around borrowing, and we're going to try and debunk it a bit.
Hello, welcome back. Now, we've had such a packed programme this evening that we are nearly out of time, but Sam has promised me that he is going to give us the most important story of the day in 90 seconds. So take it away.
Which is not enough time for you to argue. Let's bring the chart up to start with. Today, Sophie, the government needed to do something important. They needed to raise £4 billion, borrow £4 billion and able to fund day-to-day spending.
Oh, my God, £4 billion for such a big economy. I'm so scared.
Go out to the money markets and get that money. Now, this is the cost of borrowing, how much the government had to pay in order to get, will have to pay in order to borrow that money. And it is at the highest rate it has been for 16 years. The government's having to pay more.
So that's partially down to the fact that UK bonds are kind of no longer, I think, seen as the gold standard. We have kind of increasing competition from the Americans as well, which have higher interest rates, which I believe gives you higher yields on your bonds. And the reason why the kind of borrowing rate is so high right now is partly down to column A, UK bonds aren't the gold standard anymore, or a gold standard. And you've got the increasing interest rates, which means the Bank of England, has to offer more kind of yield on the returns. So that way, borrowing has been pushed up dramatically. The cost of that, I know some people say the Bank of England can just print more money, blah, blah, blah. My name's not Stephanie Kelton. I'm not arguing for like MMT or anything like that. That's way beyond my comprehension anyways, because I tried to understand it, but I didn't. But point being is that we're not here to discuss my economic illiteracy. It's to discuss, I don't think journalists should be fear-mongering about this, especially when we had stuff, even during COVID. Laura Kuenssberg was saying the government have maxed out the credit cards, yet they found another one under the sofa.
Or to borrow that it has, because people are so worried about inflation, very worried about interest rates.
Again, I don't think it's not, government borrowing is not fueling inflation. It's down to predominantly just supply side costs for the most part. That's fueling inflation, that and greed.
So they're having to pay more. Now, this is having a massive impact. This is going to be the discussion topic for the next few weeks and months, because it means, because we're going to have to pay so much in order to basically borrow money, that's less money for public services. It's less money for tax cuts, which is what lots of Conservatives want. It's less money for public sector pay.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much. For public sector pay. And all of this has a big knock-on effect. Now, this rate is higher than it was in the mini-budget when Liz Truss took over. The government insists there's not a crisis. The currency isn't tanking like it did in September, but there...
It's because we had a flashpoint here. That's why the currency kind of tanked. We saw a run on the pound because, everyone was like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then, people stopped investing in the pound, I think, or buying the pound, and, people decided, I'm going to sell up what I have. And other people decided it's time to short the pound because they thought there was going to be a run on it, and there was.
With every percentage point that goes up, that costs an extra £20 billion. We're running out of money.
It's not even true we're running out of money. This idea, jet to GDP and all this stuff. And, people, when they buy bonds, they want to know what's going to be invested into, so they know they're going to get some sort of return, right? We saw the government borrowing billions during COVID, and I just want to show you, this is the debt to GDP in the UK is about 100% right now. This was the debt to GDP around World War II. It was 270%. After the war, it went down quite dramatically. We saw a lot of investment from people like Clement Attlee, the construction of the NHS, things like that. You didn't see Clement Attlee saying, oh, we can't afford it because of World War II, I think the most expensive war that we'd been in as a percentage of our economy. You didn't see that. That's the point. And, you can even see the debt GDP being very high. As we kind of go into the run-up to the war, you can see some of Churchill's bad economics and things like that. So this idea that the country's going to go bankrupt or whatever, or we're running out of money, is simply not true. Should we be in this position? No. Is debt bad? Inherently, it's not that bad. It depends on what you're borrowing the money for. Again, Attlee borrowed a lot of money to build the NHS. He borrowed it from the Americans. Is anyone going to argue Attlee made the wrong decision for borrowing that money to construct the NHS? No. If that money is invested into public services, is investing into making this country a better place, it will boost productivity and things like that. If you invest that money just to give to your mates, it's not going to go well. But it's like any kind of economy, any business. You can borrow money. If you spend it badly, it's going to go badly. If you spend it well, things can go very well. Is debt dangerous? Yes. If we look at kind of debt to GDP, France's was actually higher than ours. I tried to find more current figures. I think I did. France's debt to GDP is 113.7%. I don't think their day-to-day borrowing is as high as ours, because I think French bonds wouldn't be seen as kind of potentially toxic as UK bonds were a few months ago. So I don't know what their borrowing is. Plus the ECB's interest rates are lower. But point being is that France's debt to GDP is 113%, whilst currently the UK's debt to GDP is about just over 100%. So, you know, all of this kind of fear-mongering around debt and debt to GDP and all this kind of stuff, it's just nonsense. France borrowed billions of pounds to bail out, to buy EDF. You know, where are all these people, you know, saying we can't afford it? You know, what Macron has done is kind of secured the future of French energy production and put it into the hands of the French public, you know, the French taxpayer. That's what he's done, because EDF can continue to kind of export energy to other countries at a premium as energy costs continue to stay high in certain countries like the UK. EDF can continue to export energy to us and charge us ridiculous amounts of money. And do you know who benefits from that? It's the French taxpayer. So if the UK, for example, decided we're going to go big on wind, and what we're going to do is we're going to either use that energy domestically and reduce the prices here, or we're going to export that energy to other countries, and we're going to make a profit. And we're going to use that money to reinvest it back into UK renewable energy and give some of that money back to the taxpayer. Who's going to say that's a stupid idea? Honestly, so it just kind of frustrates me to no end that kind of certain journalists push this narrative, especially when they don't have economics backgrounds. You can argue I don't have one. That's a fine argument, but I can kind of base my arguments in some sort of reality, whilst these guys are saying the government have maxed out the credit cards when they simply haven't. You know, why was it the case that when our debt was 270% of our GDP, were we not like, oh, credit cards are maxed out, lads? You know, nothing I can do. Sorry, Churchill bankrupted us. The Nazis bankrupted us. Bloody Hitler, you know, causing us all sorts of problems. Can't have an NHS now. It's just tragic that people kind of fall for this level of economic illiteracy. Yes, you know, debt can be bad. It can be toxic, especially when you have to service that debt. But if you use it to invest in the right areas, it can work for you. That's the point. And, you know, some people get annoyed at me saying I'm downplaying government debt or whatever. No, it's not true. But you can borrow money to invest, which is something we have to do. If you want to get the economy rolling as well, that's something that FDR did, and it did help the American economy, rather than what we saw kind of post financial crash, which was more austerity. That did not help us. Austerity inherently is not a good idea. It does not grow the economy. It chokes it off, and all the Tories did in the early 2010s is underfund key kind of public services and public funded institutions, and made the country just a miserable place to live in, whilst also giving us minimal growth. It's just it makes me sad. It makes me sad that, you know, people still fall for this stuff. You know, George Osborne called, he wants his economic policy back. And so journalists at Sam Coates should not be pushing this stuff. I don't think he's got an economics background anyways. So I don't know what he's basing his stuff on. But I'm going to leave it there. You know, at least my stuff's based in Keynesian economics. You know, one of the great economists of all time, really, in my opinion. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.